I'd just like to say a little bit about how I got out of being depressed, severely clinically depressed. It happened to me several times, really. And in fact, the last time it happened, some years ago, perhaps about 6 years ago, I think family and friends were beginning to think I'd never get out of it. I'd been in it, for about 3 years. It's terrible. I know it's a terrible, terrible condition to be in, and you think you'll never get better. And some of the things about that sort of suffering and illness, some of the stigma about it seems to say, well, you never get better, you're stuck with it now, you label with it. But you know, we can get better. I think we can get better from anything if we get the right spiritual help, as well as emotional and psychological help, on medication where appropriate, of course. And I'd just like to tell you a little bit, because people have asked me what was the wonderful practical advice that I was given that was both psychological and spiritual. So I have tried to write about it in a little article called A Ray of Hope in Depression, because I do believe it wasn't just for me, it was meant to be shared with everybody. This is my little contribution to it, and I hope some parts of it will help. It was given to me by an elderly and very lovely and holy priest, Monsignor Philip Loftus, and I don't think it was just for me. I think it was for everybody, or parts of it was anyway, but I know everybody's own journey in every way is unique, just as their relationship with God. They're looking for God. Everything about them is completely unique. Anyway, I'll speak a bit about that afterwards. And what Father told me, I was that bad that I could hardly get out of the corner of my room. I used to wake up petrified. I constantly thought I was, somebody that would never be able to love properly, love God, be loved, anything. I'd got so paralysed by negativity, negative thoughts and feelings about myself. And I'm a Catholic, and before I went to Holy Communion, I couldn't stand to go to Holy Communion really without trying to get to confession quickly beforehand, and it was never any good. I never felt any better. It was as if God was completely absent from me. I know I was blocking him now, I know that, but the thing is, so anyway, one day, by pure chance, well, it wasn't, nothing's by chance, is it? A very dear friend of mine had said a big, long 30-day prayer for me to get help, to St. Joseph, actually. And then, anyway, I went to church that day, and it happened to be him covering for another priest, and this is what he told me eventually when I went to meet him. He said, every negative thought and feeling, you have to track it down first, because it can be so quick and instant that we suddenly feel that way, and we haven't tracked the thought that made us feel that way. But anyway, to track it down if you can, and every thought and source of negativity, anxiety, etc., put it, as it were, into a pebble, and drop this pebble into a container full of water so that it goes straight down to the bottom, And as you're doing it, say, may we leave the past to God's mercy, the future to his providence, and may we face the present trusting in his grace. And I was just listening, and he said, now, when you dropped it in there, you have symbolically dropped it into God's mercy and his love, which of course is unbounding for every single person. There's nobody excluded ever. And he said, you've dropped it into his mercy, providence and grace. And like you would throw a pebble into the deep ocean, you can't go fishing for it, you know, it's gone now. But obviously we've got so used to holding on to things and ruminating about it and letting it get to you, you know, it's hard, you almost get sort of used to it really, and you don't almost feel reluctant to let it go in case you miss anything. It's funny, but we do, don't we? We're a bit perverse like that. Anyway, he said when you let it go, the effort to leave it in trust with God, that effort, you say, may we, the we refers to whoever you're offering it up for that day. And with him then we chose different days for different groups of people, like people that were in sorts of prison, or people in the Middle East, or people who were sick, or people who were addicted, or people who were stuck in difficult relationships, anything, you know, different group of people that day. And the grace that you're able to draw down by the very fact of the sacrifice of leaving it with him in trust, that grace is drawn down on them. So no longer are you living a sterile, well, you think it's sterile life where you're no good to man the beast. You've started to give a wonderful spiritual input into the world straight away. You may never meet these people, but that doesn't matter. Well, you meet them on the other, when we pass over to eternal life, but you know, that grace is working with them deep down, just like the grace that it was given to me to meet Father, really. And then he said you have to do this all the time. And of course I was so full of negative thoughts in the beginning that I was doing like loads and loads of hundreds of pebbles. Obviously I had to keep taking them out of the container, but not because I hadn't left the thought with him, just because I could never have had enough pebbles. I would have been drowned in them. And when you walk out, he said, oh, there are other practical things, very practical man. You had to go for an hour's walk every day, and you had to look closely at nature. He said even take a magnifying glass, you know, along the road and look into a flower, look into a leaf, at the veins, think about all the shades of colour, you know, look at it, look up, look out. And you had to find at least 3 things that you could honestly say thank you to God for. So of course I joked about going down the road with my magnifying glass, because I said people think I'm like Miss Marple, you know. But anyway, it was a wonderful thing to do actually. But at first it was quite hard to thank God, because we'd got so used to feeling so awful and that we'd lost the whole notion of gratitude or anything like that really. And another thing I had to do was to read a decent novel, you know, a classic sort of novel for about half an hour, twice a day, a different one. Because of course the effort to concentrate on the sentence, when you're so self-absorbed, you're absorbed in all this awful anguish, is very difficult to remember it, what you've just read, but you had to do it. So that was another offering up, the effort to do it, the effort to walk out, the effort to do that. I had to have 3 meals a day, even if they were small. I had to set the table as if for somebody else, you know, and we don't bother eating much, do we, when we feel terrible, but I had to do it. Because I did everything, he said, in obedience. And in doing it in obedience to God's representative, as Father was for me, I was doing it to God, really. And he, you know, the grace of obedience is greatly valued by God. You know, Jesus was obedient unto death, wasn't he? So wonderful virtue that's not very popular these days, but it is with God, of course. It's always popular with him. So, and Father said, do it come what may, let nothing stop you, because believe me, everything combines to try and stop you, because I'm telling you, it's the way out. It really is the way out. And other things, like he didn't allow me to keep going to confession because I was just going over and over my faults, really. And one little point about that, when I first went to him, he said to me something that I'd never even thought of. He said, are you willing to accept God's forgiveness? I thought, willing to accept it? I'm always going and going and going. And I thought to myself, yes, but you're quite right. I daren't let go of it. I daren't open myself up. I'm frightened to death deep down. You don't realise, you see, how much he loves you. You don't realise, you don't, you know. I now know the absolute truth that every single person is irreplaceable in the heart of Christ. Irreplaceable. And he died for each person, and that he wants to come and, I did it in that other little video I talked about. He wants to be our full complement and perfect supplement to build us up into the people he meant us to be. And you see, now I've got loads of physical health problems now. I mean, lots. Maybe I'll talk about those in another little one if you could stand to hear it, but I really have got a lot. I've got autoimmune diseases and complications, and one thing affects another, and there doesn't seem to be a way out. And I have nights and nights of terrible itch all over, like it drives you mad. You've got to put your feet in freezing cold water to get the blood going around, because it's in the blood. I've got a thing of the bile ducts, and other problems that cause sort of pain, and stuff like that. And anyway, so but it's chronic, you see. I did that little talk chronic thing because he helps you through everything. And I've felt cheerful even with all this and loads of other things in the last couple of years. And that is the miracle to me and my family. Actually, anybody who knows me, it's a miracle. It's not. You think, well, we need the cross, and that's another thing. The cross is not a bad thing when you carry it with him. When he carries it with you, it's a wonderful thing, really. I mean, not that you enjoy suffering. Of course you try. You do everything to be healed, of course. But it's there's an old song, isn't there? The Salvation Army sing called "The Old Rugged Cross." It's a wonderful thing, really, and we've gone off it in the West altogether. But in other parts of the world, they know. When I went to Calcutta, I couldn't believe how people were not depressed, you see. And anyway, that's another question. I'm certainly not advocating poverty in any way, but this dependence on God, this letting him carry things with us, sharing things with us, we can get through anything, really we can. But the other part, when we're on our own, in our own woundedness and mess, it's terrible. I don't want anybody to be stuck in that, and that's why I'm sharing this. So I hope and pray for everybody that sees this, and I hope you will all pray for everybody as well. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.